The Humarsian Colony. Part 1. Establishment of the Mars Colony. Chapter 1. Arrival on Mars. Description of the landing and first steps on the planet. The Ares VI lander shuddered with the final bursts of its thrusters, finally settling into unnatural stillness. Outside the viewport, an eternity of russet sand and rock stretched away under a sky the faint color of faded copper. Dr. Anya Petrova, her fingers a tangle of white-knuckled tension around the edge of the console, could feel the pulse of history hammering in her veins. They had done it. Earth's first daughter now stood on another world. System status? Her voice, usually so authoritative, chirped with an edge of wonder. She was part engineer, part poet, and everything in between was currently vibrating with the audacious joy of achievement. Green across the board, Commander. Jensen, her lead pilot, confirmed. His voice held the relief of a man who'd just wrestled a leviathan to the ground and won. Ares VI is at home on Mars. The small habitat module filled with cheers, a ragged symphony of exhausted triumph after the 6-month voyage. Anya felt a smile bloom, wide and unself-conscious. It was an emotion contagious throughout the lander, spreading to the engineers, the biologists, even to dour Dr. Ellis, for whom emotion was usually an inconvenience at best. "Let's make history, people," Anya said into the cheers, and a touch of control in her voice brought them down a notch. "Environmental suits, Team 1. Prep the airlock. It's time we took our first steps." The hours that followed were a whirlwind. The pressure equalization cycle seemed to crawl at a snail's pace, the sterile confines of the Ares VI suddenly a cage after the vastness they'd crossed. Then the hatch hissed open, and there was Mars, real and inescapable. Anya didn't hesitate. She wasn't the type for dramatics, but in the privacy of her mind, she echoed the age-old words. One small step. Her boot hit red sand, kicked up a puff of dust. In that moment, despite the bulk of her suit, she felt small under the enormity of it all. The first hours were dedicated to the pragmatics. Sensor deployment, soil samples, atmospheric readings. The thrill would keep them on their feet for days. But routine, Anya knew, was what would keep them alive. The inflatable habitat dome slowly ballooned to its full extent, its transparent polymer skin offering a 360-degree view of the desolate beauty around them. Anya found herself drawn to it again and again, staring at the horizon where distant mountains seemed to float on waves of heat haze. "We should get you your own telescope, Commander," Tanaka quipped over comms. "You seem rather taken with our view." Less taken, Tanaka, more unaware. Aware of just how small they were, a flicker of human light against the backdrop of something ancient and uncaring. "First colony or not, Mars doesn't give a damn that we're here." Tanaka's reply held a faint note of disagreement, likely muffled by a mouthful of ration bar. But Anya let it slide. Optimism was Tanaka's specialty, a vital ingredient in this cocktail of ambition and scientific daring. Still, Anya's instinct for caution niggled. Mars was no Earth. It was seductive, a siren song of discovery, but surrender meant death. The celebration would be short, a few precious hours lifted from their rigorous schedules. Anya looked around at her people, faces flushed with pride and excitement, eyes that held both wonder and a touch of well-earned wariness. They were scientists, explorers, but also very human, vulnerable. A world away from the support of their home planet. She felt a fierce, almost maternal surge of protectiveness. They had come too far to fail now. "All right, pioneers," she announced, drawing their attention. "Tonight we celebrate. Tomorrow the real work begins." The cheers were more subdued this time, threaded with the anticipation of challenges to come. This first colony wasn't just about survival. It was about building something that could last. The Humarsians, she'd taken to calling them, a testament to their hybrid nature, bound to Earth, yet forever changed by this new world. As the day bled into a Martian twilight, the color of bruised plums, Anya retreated to her small quarters, the closest thing to privacy this mission offered. She replayed the day, the moments of shared triumph, and the undercurrent of unease that wouldn't quite leave her. Mars was beautiful but also indifferent. The survival of her colony depended on the careful balance between those two truths. Chapter 2. Setting up the habitat, challenges faced in creating a livable environment. The following weeks turned into a whirlwind of assembly, testing, and relentless problem-solving. The vastness of Mars shrank as their focus zeroed in on the inflatable domes that formed their fledgling colony. Anya felt the strange mix of exhilaration and claustrophobia that defined their new existence. The thrill of building something from nothing, yet always a meter of reinforced polymer standing between her and the unforgiving Martian exterior. It was in the heart of the central habitation dome, christened prosaically Hab 1, that tensions first began to simmer. Dr. Ellis, the head of the research team, stood on the raised platform that served as their makeshift conference area. voice echoing with a mix of impatience and barely contained scorn. "Hydroponics, while vital, can wait. Our immediate focus must be the deep exploration drills. There's potential for significant geological finds just a few kilometers out," Ellis argued, her wiry frame rigid with determination. Anya ran a hand tiredly over her close-cropped hair, the first true haircut she'd managed since landing. "With respect, Doctor, hydroponics means food within 3 months. Drills mean, well, rocks. Important rocks," she conceded, "but ones we can't eat." Mutters ran through the crowd of assembled colonists. It was, Anya knew, a microcosm of the same debate raging back on Earth. The eternal struggle between the pursuit of knowledge and the practicality of survival. It was her job to navigate the balance. Tanaka, her ever-optimistic second-in-command, stepped forward, breaking the building tension. "What about a compromise? We split teams. A smaller crew focuses on the drills while we get the hydroponics up and running. We have the manpower for both." The suggestion was met with a rumble of agreement, but Ellis remained stubbornly unconvinced. "Compromise starves science. This," she said, gesturing expansively to the dusty red plain beyond the polymer, "could hold answers to the very nature of life in the universe." The fervor in Ellis's eyes was a familiar one. Anya saw it mirrored in the faces of the younger scientists, their minds already blazing with the promise of discovery. It was a hunger she understood, but it was also a dangerous one. Mars was a jealous god that demanded constant appeasement. "Science will starve if we do," she retorted, her tone firmer this time. "We have a duty to the survival of this colony. Discoveries won't mean a damn thing if we're dead in 6 months." The atmosphere in Hab 1 crackled. Jensen, his pilot's pragmatism showing, threw his support behind Anya, a move that tipped the scales. Still, the undercurrent of resentment remained. Ellis left the meeting with stiff strides, her followers trailing behind. That evening, with the triple moons of Mars painting the polymer dome with a pearlescent glow, Anya sought out Tanaka. He was up on the makeshift roof, a mesh platform offering an unfiltered view of the stars, and gazing out with the contemplative melancholy of an eternal explorer. "I feel more like a warden sometimes than a commander," Anya admitted, her voice barely louder than a sigh. Tanaka smiled, a touch sadly. "You won't win them all, Anya. Besides, a little conflict, it's the spark of progress, isn't it?" "Hope you're right," she mumbled, staring out at the vastness above. "Mars doesn't care about our little debates, though. Out here it's cooperate or die." A silence fell, punctuated by the faint hum of the life support systems. Finally, Tanaka broke it. "You know, you're good at this, the commander thing. Easy when you have a lieutenant who believes in you." Anya shot back, the compliment warming her more than she cared to admit. The first crisis, the real one, struck with the suddenness of a dust storm. It began as a flicker in the readings. One of the exterior solar arrays was malfunctioning. In the vast Martian desert, their power grid was their lifeline. Anya was in the midst of diagnostics when the secondary array coughed and died, plunging the colony into near darkness. Curses echoed over the comms. Ellis's voice, frantic, cut through. "The spectrometer, the readings, they're all corrupted. Focus on the power, Doctor. Science can wait." Anya barked back even as a cold knot formed in her stomach. Something was very wrong. Jensen, with his pilot's cool, took a charge of the repair party, suiting up to brave the thin Martian atmosphere. Through his helmet cam, Anya watched the eerie dance of flashlights and the stark silhouettes of the broken arrays. Then his voice, tense as a wire. "Commander, you're not going to believe this." His helmet cam panned across the array's base. It wasn't a malfunction. Fine slices gleamed in the flashlight beam. Deliberate cuts in the cabling. "Sabotage," Anya breathed, the word as chilling as the Martian cold. Chapter 3. Meeting the crew, introducing the main characters and their roles. In the wake of the sabotage, a grim chill had settled over the colony. The illusion of Mars as a shared challenge had shattered. Now it felt a million miles wide, with shadows holding the shape of suspicion. Anya, used to diagnosing broken machinery, found herself scrutinizing the faces of her crew, searching for answers. There was Jensen, ex-Space Force pilot, his lean frame taut with a controlled fury. He'd taken the destruction of their solar arrays not just as a blow to the colony, but as a personal insult. Beneath the surface of his usual calmness, she sensed a predator honing its claws. It had to be Ellis's lot, he muttered in Anya's tiny office, the air thick with tension and recycled oxygen, always grumbling about the focus on survival. This was their way of trying to shift the balance of power. Anya scrubbed a hand over her tired face. "Accusations get us nowhere. We need proof, Jensen." Then there was Tanaka, biologist, botanist, and the closest thing Anya had to a true friend on this desolate rock. His usually bright eyes were troubled as he oversaw the emergency rationing protocols in Hab 1's mess. The hydroponics had been days away from yielding their first meager harvest. Now the carefully calculated schedules were in disarray. "People are rattled," he reported in his soft voice. "Fear does strange things to a mind, Commander, like turning it toward sabotage." Anya finished for him. Tanaka sighed. "Some will think so, but others will be thinking of how to get through the next few weeks with even less food. It's when hope dies that we should truly worry." The research team, meanwhile, had practically barricaded themselves in their lab. The damaged spectrometer, their wounded comrade. Dr. Ellis, once a whirlwind of intellectual passion, now moved with a pinched, haunted air. The saboteur had not merely struck at their equipment, but at the very core of their purpose. One evening, as the desolate Martian sunset painted the colony domes with streaks of blood red, Anya found herself drawn to the makeshift workshop. The hum of machinery and the smell of ozone had a grounding effect in the midst of the crisis. It was Mikhail, the chief engineer, who looked up and offered a weary half-smile when she entered. Short and powerfully built, Mikhail's hands held a grace that defied his gruff demeanor. He ran the workshop with unquestioned authority, and had spent the past day and night devising a jury-rigged system to reroute power and keep the life support systems running. "You aren't one for speeches," he noted, nodding towards the entrance. "No rousing call about shared purpose. Speeches are for when things work. Right now it feels—" Anya gestured vaguely towards the Martian wastelands beyond the dome. "Too big for words." Mikhail grunted, flicking a switch on the battered power converter with surprising deftness. "Big, aye, that it is, but not unconquerable. Not if we focus on what needs doing." The us was not lost on Anya. Mikhail, despite his prickly exterior, possessed a deep, quiet loyalty to the colony, and an engineer's unshakable faith in solving problems. He, perhaps more than anyone, recognized the stark reality they faced. Back on Earth, there were contingencies for most things, but a saboteur amongst a 30-person crew on Mars? Contingency plans didn't stretch that far. Anya knew it was her responsibility to find a solution, to navigate not only the logistical battle for survival, but also the fraying trust, the fear curdling in her people's eyes. She met Ellis's gaze across the makeshift conference table a few days later. Gone was the fiery, ambitious researcher, replaced by a woman etched with lines of exhaustion and a flicker of desperation. "We can salvage the spectrometer," she rasped, the admission a heavy weight in the tense room. "But without stable power, further geological readings are impossible. We might as well be blindfolded out there." Anya leaned forward, fixing Ellis with a serious stare. "The colony survives first, Doctor. Once it does, you can go dig up whatever secrets Mars has to offer, and I promise you'll have my full support. But until then..." She let the sentence hang with unspoken finality. It was a truce, uneasy and laced with unspoken concessions, but a necessary one. The saboteur remained a phantom, a shadow whispering in the corners of their isolated existence. Yet amidst the fear, a strange thing was happening. Bonds were forged in the shared hardship. Anya watched as Tanaka, his expertise in rationing vital, was pulled reluctantly into advisory meetings. Mikhail, always a solitary figure, found himself the subject of nervous requests for consultations from Ellis's team. The Humarsians, she realized, were taking shape not through some grand vision, but from the desperate necessity of the moment. They were becoming less explorers, less scientists, and more an organism focused on the singular beating heart of survival.